With increasing automation and digital transformations, the significance of cybersecurity has grown exponentially. To talk more about the opportunities and potential of cybersecurity and its applications, we have our next panel with us. Moderating our next panel is the remarkable Mr. Ramkumar Narayanan. Mr. Ramkumar is the VP Technology and MD for VMware India. He's a global leader focusing on data-driven digital product innovation spanning consumer and enterprise markets. He is member of Executive Council and Chairperson NASSCOM Product Council. He has been a member governing council of Derby Foundation, an academic incubator, member advisory board of Sukino Healthcare, a leading provider of long-term healthcare management for patients with chronic ailments, member advisory board of Zenov, a research consulting and advisory company with core expertise in product engineering and digital transformation. He has also been the general manager India and global head monetization products at eBay Marketplaces, VP of product management at Yahoo, and head of Unlimited Potential Group at Microsoft, among other titles. He was also the CEO and founder of Engineering Dynamics Inc. Mr. Ramkumar holds a BE in Mechanical Engineering from Anna University, Chennai, MS in Mechanical Engineering, and MBA from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Sir, it is our immense pleasure to host you. Passing it on.
Thank you, Tapish. I think thanks for the kind words, but I think I pale in comparison to the panelists that we have today, who are really expertise in this particular topic. I am no expert, but I think all of us who've been in this space for a long time and continue to be here. It's not hyperbole to say that cybersecurity is going to be one of the biggest underpinnings and foundational topics as the world digitizes. And this becomes not just a worldwide topic of worthy of discussion, but even from an India perspective. We've had so many stories over the last 18 months about ransomware attacks of enterprises, about individuals and consumers getting phished and various kinds of attacks on them from a cybersecurity perspective. As the world moved towards working from home and the new normal, all of us are connecting from inherently vulnerable networks from our homes into enterprises and various other organizations. So this becomes a topic which is even more important today than it was even I would say a year ago. And none better than this to discuss this with a really galaxy of eminent persons who we have today to discuss this. Now, when we talk about attack patterns, they're very similar, right? I mean, you have phishing, you have vulnerability of software to gain entry, characterized by a lateral movement once the cyber criminals get into an enterprise and they start going sideways, exfiltration of data, and either from the enterprise or being able to intercept this inflow between the various systems. And then attempts at erasing logs as they go out, right? Attackers are getting more and more nimble and sophisticated by the day. As they say, the bad guys are always one step ahead of the good guys. And, we have seen this a lot, right? I mean, we have seen this over the last few months. I mean, even if you open the paper on a daily basis, this becomes a topic of conversation. Now, motive seems to vary. Motive seems to vary in terms of, the cyber, in terms of why the attackers are doing this. Some of it is money. Some of it is just stealing state secrets. And, there are players at a different country level who are attacking to gain each other's state secrets. And then crippling of infrastructure. I mean, this is just, whether it's ransomware attacks or whether it is just malfeasance to get into an infrastructure of physical infrastructure. This could be power networks. It could be, various kinds of utilities, and be able to do these things. So cyber is the new frontier of war, as they say, right? I mean, physical war has changed, and cybersecurity becomes this, nefarious war that is getting played out in the back end. So without further ado, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes, 3 to 4 minutes for each of the panelists both to introduce themselves and weigh in on this topic as we go along. And just from in terms of how we're going to do this, we'll do the opening remarks and then we will get into the dialogue. And really, we want to be able to cover a range of as much as we can, but we also want to take the audience questions as we go through this process. So feel free to put your questions through chat or however the right way to do it. You would like to ask this question, and we will address that as we go along. So without further ado, I would like to go to Professor Agarwal for his opening remarks, and then we will move on to the others as well. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you much. It's a real pleasure to be here in this panel to discuss the aspects of cybersecurity, especially as they relate to our country. As you very rightly said, Ramkumarji, that last year and a half, as the transition to digital domain has accelerated thanks to the pandemic, correspondingly the cybersecurity challenges have increased very significantly. And this is a domain which is at the moment still, I would say, in its initial stages in our country. We have been a little behind the curve, so to speak. But hopefully we will catch up soon and will in near future be able to develop and deploy solutions developed within the country. Because one of the critical things about cybersecurity is, unlike the some equipment or machines that one can import from outside, if you import cybersecurity tools from outside, there is always the question mark about whether they themselves have a trapdoor which could be activated at the right time. And that is a question that is very hard to answer. And therefore, the safety lies in developing one's own tools and making sure that everything is what it should be. So just a brief introduction about myself and where I am coming from. I am Manindra, Agrawal, Professor in Computer Science Department at IIT Kanpur. And I currently head the Technology Innovation Hub established by the Government of India in cybersecurity at IIT Kanpur. And the aim of this Technology Innovation Hub is threefold. One, to do R&D work in developing tools for cybersecurity. Two, to translate those tools to deployment stages through either working with the existing industry or new creating startups. In fact, promoting startups is one of the key objectives of ours. And three, to step up and expand the training in cybersecurity very significantly around the country. So these are the three aspects we will be focusing on as we go along, and we hope to make a non-trivial contribution to the cybersecurity ecosystem in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think very, very important topics from a C3I perspective. Over to you, Naresh.
Thanks, Ram. So first of all, very humbled and excited to be part of this session. Quick introduction about myself. So I've been working in the tech industry close to 20 years now, mostly in deep tech startups and mid-sized companies in US and India. Last couple of years have been a lot more on the modern technology like DevOps, DevSecOps, cloud native technology, a lot of AI, ML, big data kind of areas. And last few years specifically, I've been working very closely in cybersecurity. Currently, I lead India Engineering Center for a very early stage startup in cloud native application security and DevSecOps, which are basically forward-looking innovations happening in security areas. Now, sharing my broad views to start with, I think world is becoming digital more than ever, right? And technology is touching us increasingly every single day. Over last couple of years, I think India is becoming probably the largest digital nation in the world. And India has some of the largest internet services consumed by millions and millions of people, right? For example, if you look at the sheer Aadhaar system or the railway ticket booking system, the tax filing, it's amazing to see millions of people leveraging those services every single day. Now, during pandemic, I think all the digital innovation, the digital adoption has gone to a very different level, right? And each of us are consuming more and more services digitally, right? Whether it's retail, healthcare, banking, insurance, right? And I think it's just the beginning. I think in a decade from now, probably most of our services will be delivered through just a small mobile phone. Now, while technology has made our life a lot easier, convenient, simpler, connecting the world, And for a country like India, it's a huge level player, because a lot of our large-scale problems can only be solved through technology. Right? So it's a blessing for a country like India. But there's a huge dark side of it, which is the cybersecurity. Just to give some quick statistics, right? Just to put things in perspective. Globally, it's $1 trillion impact of cyber attacks today. A typical data breach costs close to $4 million. In context of India, probably a typical data breach costs to $500,000. If you talk about India specifically, the number of significant cyber attacks has increased from 50,000 to 10 lakhs just in the last 5 years. Specifically, in the last 2 years of pandemic, they've increased from 200,000 to 1 lakh. 2 lakhs to 10 lakhs. So 5x increase in the sheer number of cyber attacks just in the last 2 years, right? And it is just the beginning, because the cost of cyber attacks is becoming lower, and the attackers are becoming a lot more sophisticated. As we in the industry start using a lot of these advanced technologies like AI, ML, computing, etc., attackers are typically a step ahead of us, right? And the cost of experimenting on making attacks has been going down because the compute is becoming cheaper. Similarly, with the stuff like botnet, in botnet, the attackers are able to leverage the compute of people like you and me, and we see the number of attacks, the impact of attacks only going up in coming years. Another big challenge has been the whole Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies, because now all the ransomware attacks, the currency they are asking for is not the real currency. It's just some sort of Bitcoins or cryptocurrency, and that makes it harder for legal agencies to track the attackers going forward. So overall, I think it's a huge problem for the world, and unless and until we address this in timely manner, I don't think we can continue to leverage technology for all the good things going forward.
Thank you, Naresh. Very important points made. We'll come back to these as we get into the discussion. Devika, over to you. I think you work in an industry which is at the core of probably helping protect some of these. Over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I have a few slides to present.
Sure.
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. To introduce myself, I'm Devika. I completed my doctoral studies from IIT Madras, and right now I am the CEO of a cybersecurity startup named Grid Sentry. It is now in the ideation stage, and we are applying for incubation at IIT Kanpur. So that's a big background, and I am discussing about the cybersecurity issues, in particular to power sector. Why? Because cyber insecurity is now a serious concern, mainly in broad domains. The first domain is enterprise information technology, and then we have operation technology. And power infrastructure is a subset of this operation technology. Now, in electric power systems, we have a highly interconnected network which transfers power from generation, then to transmission distribution, and then to the end customers, which are residential as well as commercial industries. But in addition to this power flow that we are having, there is a highly interconnected telecommunication network which carries very crucial information, which is critical for the stable and safe operation of the power grid. And thus, we have a cyber physical system in our power systems, and thus it is vulnerable to cyber attacks. As it has already been pointed out in the introductory note, like cyber attacks are now the potential to be a warfare strategy, and even Russia has developed a cyber weapon to disrupt the US power grids. And these have the effect of killing humans, and that has been studied already by further reports. So the countdown is already on. To emphasize the impact of a cyber attack in critical power infrastructure, I take the example of 2015 Ukraine cyber attack, Around 50 substations were affected. The servers, workstations, and field devices were damaged. And this is not just about losing or stealing information, but the whole nation was destabilized for long hours. There were around 3.5 hours of power outage, which is pretty huge, and 135 megawatt load impact affecting 225,000 customers. Though we understand the impact of cyber attacks in critical power infrastructure, there are several challenges also when we have to actually implement a cybersecurity measure in critical power infrastructure. One, it is mainly because of its unique communication network topology, and that too within a network topology, we have different protocols within each sub-network. So such a complex network is power infrastructure, especially the cyber physical infrastructure that we have when we consider the power sector. Now, if we want to define a cybersecurity measure and to test it, the embedded systems are so complicated to be emulated, and thus this will hinder the capabilities of testing a cybersecurity mechanism. Also, the equipment that is being commissioned in any power infrastructure are supposed to be running for around 15 to 25 years, and thus cybersecurity mechanisms will have to deal with legacy utility environment, and network scanning, etc. may not work there. In addition to that, as I was telling, this telecommunication network is carrying time-critical information and messages which have an operating range of around milliseconds, and thus the standards in power systems do not allow encryption for such time-critical messages. So the approach that I would say, there are major three approaches. One, we should act now. We should really act now, and we should have acted yesterday, but we should act now.
Okay.
Yeah, then to summarize, maybe I should say the three approaches that we should be concentrating on is to train the personnel who are handling cybersecurity infrastructure, cybersecurity as well as such critical infrastructure, not only power, oil and gas, etc. To develop and concentrate on online tools that are sitting on the network 24/7 and helping in intrusion protection and intrusion detection. We should also unify and sync our actions towards cybersecurity so that there is a single task force which will handle cybersecurity. And to give a brief summary of what Grid Sentry would do, that is a startup that is going to be soon incubated. We concentrate first on traction power grid, then we move on to urban utility grid, then captive industrial grid and microgrid. So these are the areas where we would like to have an online cybersecurity tool which would help in intrusion protection as well as detection. So thank you. That's the summary that I would.
Thank you, Devika, and good that there's some live. There's a lot of activity in the startup ecosystem around this space. If you could stop sharing, then maybe we can get back to the discussion. That'd be great.
Sure. Thank you.
Super. So Devika, let me just stay with you for a second. I mean, I won't ask you when is the right time to act, because I think you've been very, very clear in your 3 steps of now, and yesterday, right? Almost. Yeah. But, the reality is, and I would love to ask this, question to the others as well, but let me start with you. An enterprise, you can't just, rip and replace, right? I mean, your tools, your processes, your people, your training, everything else. Mm-hmm. How are the utilities starting? I mean, utilities are considered like, they're relatively legacy in their operating models and the way they think about it. And also, I'm sure they have a wide variety and vintages of computing sitting in their environment. Yeah. Is there how do you go about this? How do you prepare for something like this, while you have to act on it yesterday, but you have some realities to deal with? So maybe we can touch upon that as the first point to talk about is, how do you take a legacy enterprises and move them forward in this domain?
Yeah, that's what I told, the 3 T's approach that we should. The first thing that we should be generating an awareness that this is a serious impact that we have. So that is somewhere lacking between in the utility environment, and maybe PAN IIT and things like that should be coming forward to educate the very basic thing over there. So training is something very important, because most of the cyber attacks that have happened were just like browsing some online stores in some critical machines. So those were the attacks. So we just can't let any simple personnel to be very careless enough to allow any attacker to happen. So the basic thing that should be happening at the first level is training. And with training, automatically the demand for online tools would arise. So that is how the ecosystem should be growing. So this is what I would like to summarize about it.
Great. Professor, let me come to you on that, because I think you made a point in your opening remarks about the fact that the tools are sometimes a problem by themselves, because depending on the tool and the vendor and the vintage and the history of the tool, you could be opening yourself up for worse problems than the tool itself, right? That the tool may have solved. In your experience of, I'm sure you work across a set of industries on this topic, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the same thing. How do they prepare themselves? Because, if they're supposed to have prepared yesterday, but as you know, the lethargy always is there in the system. And how do you actually move this forward? What is your advice to organizations?
More or less the same as Devika said. I think half the battle would be won simply by observing some SOPs that namely do not access random websites from a critical computer. Keep the patches updated on your software, all the software that you're using, keep the patches on, regular updates. Don't let it fall behind in like 3 months is gone and the software is not yet updated with the latest patches. Exercise care in, the sensitive information that you have, exercise care with that. So these are very simple things, easily implementable. It's just that it needs to be built into your habit. And once that is done, there is already a significant step up in the security that would happen. And I think as of today, that is the most important thing that should be done. Development of tools, their robustness testing, etc. Everything will take time, and we have some great startups and companies who are working on this. But while that happens, I think these simple things that can be put in place that would be wonderful.
Sure. Thank you. Naresh, coming to you, right? I mean, one of the things that CIOs keep talking about is the fact that, the network is patched with a whole bunch of tools. Typically a large enterprise has hundreds of, security tools at various levels of infrastructure, starting with whether you go edge to cloud, edge to the data center or data center to the edge, hundreds of tools. These are interacting with each other, and they are patching every section of the network. In your experience, and you touched upon this in your opening remarks when talking about the impact of data breaches and things like that. Can we talk a little bit about, are these tools starting to coalesce? Will we see fewer tools from, a fewer vendors with more tools that are actually spanning the gamut? Or are we going to go the other way, where you're going to have a whole bunch of new tools coming up, which will start to, having to work through the enterprise? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think a fantastic question, I would say. Yeah, I think, as you rightly said, I think security tooling is extremely fragmented. Right.
Yeah.
But at the macro level, the concept of defense in depth will continue. That means you need to have defense at each layer of your stack. That will continue. However, with the cloud adoption, today the enterprise has a wide spectrum of very legacy technologies from mainframes to very modern cloud. As the enterprise become more modern, goes to more and more cloud, I think there will be consolidation of tooling, consolidation of techniques, processes, will be more around the cloud security. That will definitely reduce the fragmentation. But in general, the concept of defense in depth will continue. That's how the entire security is planned.
Yeah. But the weakest link in all of this is the human instinct, because a lot of it is because of human errors that you start to open up, different pieces of this. So, and part of that human, and talking about human, right? I mean, training is one aspect of it, and as Professor and Devika touched upon it, you have an SOPs that you have to follow, etc. Right? But in terms of, if you think about that vulnerability that is at one human, do you believe that as we look ahead, we will have tools that will actually help the human person in the chain help themselves from not making those errors? I mean, is that AI and ML? You touched upon AI and ML. What is the state of art and of AI and ML in the cybersecurity space at this point in time?
Right. So few quick comments there. Right. One is there's a concept of shift left which is coming in now, which means that when you develop a software, when you work on a configuration, when you make changes to software or a configuration, as you rightly said, 80% of attacks are not complex. They are mostly caused by some very simple or a simple gap in a code or in a config or a human error, and they can be easily prevented, right? So now, so far, the security has been taken care when everything is developed in terms of a software or a configuration. Now, the new approach is shift left the security. That means over a period of time, you start the security closely tie up with the software development lifecycle. So when you change a config, when you patch a bug, or when you update something, at that level itself, there will be a lot of static scanning or dynamic scanning happening, which will surface a large number of simpler but important gaps. And that will significantly reduce the cost of fixing the issue, because the cost of fixing a security issue goes exponentially higher, depends upon where do you find that in your cycle. So shifting left of security will play a very, very important role going forward to catch these simpler but important and easier human errors or config errors or coding errors.
Okay, got it. Okay. And, we talked about enterprises and organizations, but let's talk about consumer for a second, because, as you rightly pointed out, all of you have pointed this out, right? As digitization has increased, particularly in India, we have gone exponential in terms of mobile adoption and mobile internet adoption, and then tools that people are using on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in e-commerce, payments, fintech, banking, all of these kinds of things. But, there's a question that's come from the audience as well. A lot of people in India are not very cyber literate, right? I mean, they don't think twice about sharing an OTP with somebody else, or, reacting to a phone call, a phishing call that they get on the phone or through WhatsApp or, other mechanisms. How do we move forward to protect people, not just from themselves, right? That's one piece to it, but also from a policy and regulatory perspective. Because today, organizations can get away scot-free. I mean, we've seen this so many times. Somebody gets breached, their data shows up on the dark web, and then, the company is in denial mode, right? And there's no real levers. I mean, in other countries, there are laws against this where the company is held liable if they hide the fact that they have been breached. In India, that's not yet in place, right? So I would love to hear from each of you. Maybe we'll start with you, Professor, because you're deeply, I'm sure, in a lot of these kinds of dialogue, even with government, to talk about how do we protect the consumer and from a liability and policy perspective from them. Love to hear your thoughts.
That's to me, addressed to me?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. So a couple of important things that need to be done here. One is, of course, this data protection bill that is slated to get approved sooner than later. That will address many of these issues which pertain to company owning data or keeping data and disowning the breaches, etc. So, but more than that, this issue of common people not being security conscious is a really important one, and there is no easy solution to that. What is needed is a multi-pronged strategy, which would include, one is significant public campaign through various media channels to reach out to everyone and tell them that, look, these are very crucial things that need to be protected. And second, I think that will play even a more critical role for future is to incorporate some of these things right at the school curriculum so that the next generation, while it is growing up, inculcates these habits from day one, so to speak, so that it becomes a part of the habit. And then it will be much easier for, this security consciousness to develop in this society. So these are the things that I think will require to be done at a large scale. And without that, with digital domain, the thing is that our bodies are tuned to sense physical danger. If you are going to a dark spot, immediately all the senses will be at their max out, and they'll be looking for trouble, trying to figure out ways to avoid trouble. But when we are sitting in our room and browsing web, no sense fires, and then we could be actually in a equally dangerous situation, but we don't even realize. So that's something that needs to be sort of drilled into the people, and
no, that's a great point.
Time that's required.
Yeah, and also I would imagine that even the applications that we develop, they're really developed for a sliver of the audience, and becomes very difficult for many people to navigate them, either due to literacy levels or just experience or various other things, which also opens up people to these dangers, right? I mean, of having to share it with somebody else because they need somebody else's help to actually be able to access the service because they themselves are not able to make sense out of it. And I would actually talk to you, Devika, I would like to come to you on that front, right? I mean, you have been in large organizations, you now have a startup. Where do you think, if you think about India, right? And there's a notion of Bharat, and Bharat is not just about rural versus, urban. It is also about, if you look at the socio-economic segmentation, right? And it could be, literate people, but not digitally savvy, like maybe older generations, etc. over time. And, the thing that became very difficult for them to navigate, we saw this again and again, right? Whether it be digital banking, whether it be, mobile payments or etc. Where, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, as we look ahead, what guidance would you give to other members of your startup fraternity to say, hey, we need to think about experiences very differently?
Yeah, in that case, maybe we'll take a simple example of what COVID has taught us. It is just not following SOPs. We can't we can't educate each and every way. Like India is very vast. We have 135 crore people in this country. So to educate each and everyone and to make the SOP foolproof is not very easy. So what I would say is, if you take COVID, just following your SMS is not enough. You need your vaccines also. So vaccine over here, when you come to cybersecurity, is your online tools. So the startup ecosystem should be focusing on these tools for cybersecurity tools, online, especially automated, I should add. And with these, if we have, so the training, educating the mass as well as having these online tools should go hand in hand with equal priority. And then maybe we could have a good, at least 85-90% coverage. So I should say that startup fraternity is that we should be concentrating on the online development tools. So that is very important. Educating shall go parallelly. So these two things should be done with equal priority. That is my answer for this.
Okay. And Naresh, coming to you on the same thing, right? I mean, do you believe, as you look at it, and even as a consumer, you use some of these tools today, do you believe that it is actually inclusive, or do we need to be doing more of rethinking this? I mean, it started tangential to the cybersecurity aspect, but utilization of these tools and how people use them also opens people up for other dangers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a clear digital divide we have seen, especially now, further adding up in the COVID phase, right? And I don't think we are doing enough, whether it's government or companies, right, to make the digital services simpler to be consumed by a large section of society. So definitely that's an area that needs some attention and focus, I believe.
Okay. Professor, coming to you, right? I'm coming back to you on a topic of academic research in the cybersecurity space. I think especially focused on India, because India has some unique challenges and also it needs to develop those capabilities internally. Just depending on startups or large companies is not good enough, right? I mean, you need that, every other country has got a very, very active academic research programs that then get productized through startups or other mechanisms. Where are we at? What's the state of the art in India? What is your opinion in terms of where are we with respect to benchmarking ourselves with other countries?
Unfortunately, we are not doing very well at the moment. If you look at the academia in the country, there are very few groups who are, one could say, are in a reasonably strong shape. So this is something that is absolutely critical because, as you rightly said, that academia forms a very critical component in terms of R&D work, which could lead to the tools. Also, not to forget about the training side. We have a shortage of cybersecurity professionals in the country, and academia will have to play an essential role in addressing that need. Now, it's a catch-22 situation right now because we have very few people in academia. Therefore, the output that comes is also very small, and therefore the ecosystem remains small. We'll have to find ways to break out of this sort of low-level loop. We have to aggressively bring people, well-trained people from outside the country by offering them suitable positions in academia here. We also have to scale up the training very significantly. And there is no option but to work with industry here because academia on its own can't develop. There's just not enough numbers to be able to make that significant impact. So there is absolute requirement to join hands with the industry, startups, and co-develop things. And that's what we should be aiming for.
Is that something that you would be aiming through, through your C3I initiative, etc., to build those partnerships?
Absolutely. This is I would say, at the heart of our strategy to have a very close relationship, almost seamless relationship with industry and startups. So, in fact, we have right now in our lab sitting, several people are working who are both research engineers in the lab as well as doing their startup. So it's really something that we are following, that we can't segregate these different entities here because the numbers are too small.
I guess we have an example right here, Devika, who's done a PhD from IIT Madras and now a startup founder. That's a great collaboration there. But would you also create avenues for people from industry, not necessarily from startup side, but also people who work in large organizations today who are cybersecurity people? How can they participate? I mean, for our audience who are here, what would be the avenues for them to come back, and how would they approach this? Right? I mean, a lot of times it's about not knowing who to go to. They're really passionate about it, but they don't know who to approach. Would you have any guidance for them?
Yeah, well, right now the person to approach, which would be either me or Professor Sandeep Shukla, and the two of us are really managing this C3I center. Okay. And for industry partnership, also something works equally well. Which industry will have its own establishment somewhere else, but there could be a small team which can go back and forth. Yeah. And we have some great facilities here, test beds, etc., which can be utilized, and we'll be very happy to share that with the industry. Yeah. To test out their solutions and co-develop them.
Naresh, would you have any message for either the Pan IIT diaspora is very wide, right? I mean, and there are people all over the world. What would your message be to them and how they can participate in this topic in India, right? I mean, the diaspora helping the ecosystem, get better at what they do, whether they come from academia, they come from industry or wherever. What's your thoughts on that and how can that help?
Yeah, I think one role model I would say to look at for cybersecurity is Israel. In spite of being a small country with very limited resources, they have done wonderfully well in terms of innovations. And it's all because of their focus and the support they've got from their global peers sitting in US and the West. Yeah. So definitely, I think as we heard from Professor, right, it's all about bringing the right people together, the government, academia, the industry experts, in India, US, West, and create a platform, right, where we can nurture these ideas, startups, and that's how we start to seed it. And slowly, I think over a period of time, we can make one of the largest startup ecosystem in India around cybersecurity.
So basically, you're saying the diaspora can act as mentors. They can come in and
Absolutely.
Work with the startup founders and help them get better. Think about problem sets which are wider in nature and help them go to market very more easily.
Absolutely.
So Devika, coming back on that same topic, right? As a founder, what is your wish list from the broader ecosystem to help make you successful? What is your ask?
Yeah, okay. Like I am dealing, like I said in my opening remark, I deal with a very complex infrastructure like power. And when you have legacy systems already there, testing any product is very difficult because you need a foolproof lab setup which needs so that we can demonstrate our product and then we can give it to a utility because that is very much required from the utility end also. So the lab infrastructure is something that we face as a difficulty in general, not only power infrastructure, any critical infrastructure you take, you need a foolproof demonstration. That is one thing. So maybe the alumni could be actively involved in such lab setups. And the further thing that I would do, what has already been done may not be repeated by others. So there shouldn't be a repetition of work and just waste of manpower and time. So for that, we should be having we should be in unity and sync so that we have a single table to discuss the whole thing, what has been done, just not in power sector, everywhere. Like we should have every domain people to have a single task force so that we have, like, it's just like you have a military defense, you have a single rule there, because this is as equivalent to a warfare that which engineers have to be facing. So at unity among every domains of engineering stream should come up together, especially computer science and the critical infrastructure sector, so that there is a unique task force also. So these two parts, like in developing the tools as well as having a single task force. So these two areas are maybe what we can be contributing more.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. I think we have about 5 minutes left. So we'll do a quick round of closure with each of you. Professor, we'll start with you. What would be your advice to the audience in a broader front or any other topic as a set of closing remarks? Not able to hear you.
So I was on mute here. We are at a very interesting stage in this whole evolution of cybersecurity scenario in the country. It's completely clear that there is still a long way to go, but also the fact that there is a significant amount of interest now. It's a great opportunity, frankly, to some startup like Devika and others who it's literally a greenfield, and you can bring solutions. There is a tremendous demand for solutions, and create something like what Naresh said, that Israel being a kind of a role model here, that the way they develop this entire ecosystem in cybersecurity, we have an opportunity to do the same. And if we can pull it off, that will be fantastic. I think next 5 years would be very crucial here. And I hope that we all will collectively put our resources together to make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Devika?
Yeah, what I said already, we should be joining hands and working together so that we don't want some cyber attack to be happening to our country. So it's the time that we should act now.
Absolutely.
My conclusion.
Thank you. Naresh?
Yeah, I would say India will continue to become the largest digital nation. On one side, we have a challenge to deal with cybersecurity, but on the other side, there's a huge opportunity. We already have one of the largest workforce for cybersecurity engineers and pen testers in the world. What we need is to fundamentally move up in the chain and focus a lot more innovation, right? So that we can become the hub of innovation for cybersecurity for the rest of the world. That's how if everybody can come forward, right, and contribute a bit, be it idea, be thinking about solving those problems fundamentally, working with government, academia, industry, that will be amazing.
Great. Thank you. So again, a fantastic discussion. I think we could have gone on for a much longer time, and I know we're only scratching the surface in terms of what we have, but the panel was really, really well balanced. We have people who are extremely experienced, people who've been doing this from an industry perspective, people who've been doing this, starting to do this from a startup perspective. But I think just to kind of bring it home and kind of paraphrase the points that were made today, one is the fact that, this is the time to act. And, we have to, as India becomes a digital nation, and there is a very broad adoption of cyber and digital as a whole, this cybersecurity cannot be a bolt-on. It has to be, designed into the system, not designed after the system. So that's very clear. Second, I think everybody has to join hands. This is not any one organization or one community's, responsibility to make sure cybersecurity is great. The ingredients are here, right? I mean, we are just starting, but the ingredients are here. We have, like Naresh, you rightly mentioned, the very large set of people in industry who are today experienced in cybersecurity, whether they work for multinational companies, whether they're working in startups, or they're starting to do other things. And then academia is starting to wake up to the reality that academic research and industry have to go together. There's no two ways about it. And it's very happy to hear that IIT Kanpur, the C3I program, and I'm sure the other IITs are also looking at this, that they're creating the right avenues for people to partner, collaborate. It's now up to all of us to actually take advantage of it and step forward to make it happen. And the last but not least is we have a very large diaspora. And how best can we orchestrate and take advantage of that diaspora and create avenues for them to contribute back to how India can become a cybersecurity nation and secure not just our borders, but really become a known for cybersecurity in a way in which today Israel is or others are. To become that centric, we are already known for IT services. We are already known for our product ecosystem. We have a lot of ambition over the next few years from NASSCOM product to actually be, aim for becoming a very, very significant part of the larger product ecosystem around the world, not just in India. But I think cybersecurity is a huge potential opportunity for us to link those two things together and become a cyber secure nation over the next few years. And as Professor pointed out, I think the next 5 years are very critical. I think we have to materially make progress and come together as an industry and academia and as India to decide what our big ambitions are going to be in the cybersecurity space. Thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers for having all of us here. I hope the audience, got a glimpse of what is potential and what needs to be done. And they are also itching to get involved in this process. And I think there are many avenues being created for them to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.